The vile Void Reaper cruelly devoured the Zephyrus star, consuming the Ullian homeworld in darkness, just as the cowardly alien civilizations across the galaxy trembled in fear, ignoring the panicked pleas of the doomed Ullian race. All alien races except for the brave humans. Seasoned human space explorer Terry Baker had been monitoring comms chatter on the fringes of Ullian space, when the desperate transmission from an Ullian named Laros reached his ship. The aliens spoke of a terrifying, all-consuming entity, the Void Reaper, which had already extinguished a dozen star systems, erasing planets and snuffing out all light and life in its horrific path. The Ullians' advanced tech was useless. Laros begged the spacefaring races of the galaxy to send aid before it was too late, before the Void Reaper consumed everything. Then the transmission went dark. To Baker's shock, he discovered Laros's distress call had been broadcast to thousands of worlds. Every alien civilization knew the Ullians' plight, yet no one stepped up to help. Baker immediately charted a course to Zephyrus, pushing his ship's engines to their max. But as he dropped out of warp, his heart seized. The Ullian homeworld lay in ruins. Continents had been shattered, cities reduced to rubble. Billions were dead. Only a few scattered pockets of survivors remained, living primitively amongst the planet's wreckage. Baker rendezvoused with Laros in the remnants of the aliens' once great capital. The pitiful Ullian fell to his knees, weeping in despair as he saw Baker was the only one to answer his call. "The Void Reaper comes," Laros wailed, pointing a shaky finger skyward as an eclipsing darkness fell across the planet. And far in the starry void, Baker glimpsed a writhing colossal shadow blotting out Zephyrus's sun, slowly devouring the star as it crept ever closer to finish the Ullians and consume all. No one else was coming. The humans alone stood against this cataclysmic threat. Baker gripped his plasma blaster tight, knowing what must be done to save this world, to save every world. "We're the only ones left," Baker said. "Only humans can kill this thing now, or it will eat the whole damn galaxy." Baker and Laros scrambled to evacuate the remaining Ullians from the planet's surface before the Void Reaper consumed all. Ullian ships lifted off in droves, fleeing the doomed world as fast as their engines could carry them. In the chaos, Baker caught glimpses of the aliens' advanced technology, sleek energy weapons that could slice through hull plating like butter, and shimmering force fields that could withstand the vacuum of space. "Isn't this tech enough to stop that thing?" Baker asked, helping a limping Ullian into an evac shuttle. As the last Ullian ships broke atmosphere, Baker watched in horror as the Void Reaper descended on Zephyrus, like a ravenous beast. The monster's impossibly dark form seemed to drink in all light, leaving only a starless abyss as it fed. Cities and continents vanished into the nothingness, erased from existence. Then Zephyrus's star flickered out, and Baker found himself staring into a terrifying absence, where a thriving system had once been. Safely aboard Baker's ship, the Odyssey, Laros collapsed against a bulkhead and wept. But Baker's eyes were hard, his mind racing. This couldn't go on. That thing would eat every star in the galaxy if they didn't stop it, and if the most advanced alien weapons couldn't even dent it. "We have to study it," Baker said suddenly. "Get in close, see if it has any weaknesses, a power source, a control system, anything." Laros looked at him like he was insane. "Get close to that, we barely escaped with our lives." "Have you got any better ideas? That thing's not stopping, we have to try." Baker's tone left no room for argument. Laros sighed in defeat. "May the gods have mercy on us." Baker plotted an intercept course, and the Odyssey streaked through hyperspace towards the Void Reaper's last known coordinates. As they drew closer to their quarry, a palpable dread settled over the ship. The void of space seemed to darken outside the viewports, like a creeping, hungry shadow. Baker tried to focus on his controls, but his heart hammered in his chest. Just then the sensor panel lit up. "I'm picking up an energy reading," Laros said, leaning in close. "It's faint, but it's coming from inside the Reaper." Baker and Laros looked at each other, a mix of fear and desperate hope in their eyes. An energy source. If they could get to it, Sabotage it somehow. The Odyssey plunged on through the abyss, drawing ever nearer to the cosmic horror that had already devoured so much. Baker gripped the helm tightly, trying not to think about what would happen if they failed. The Odyssey lurched violently, as it was inexorably pulled towards the heart of the Void Reaper. Terry gripped the helm, trying to maintain control, but the ship bucked and shuddered against his commands. Laros clung to his seat, eyes wide with terror, as the viewscreen filled with an impenetrable darkness. Terry gritted his teeth, fighting to keep the ship steady. But it was a losing battle. The Void Reaper's gravitational pull was too strong, and the Odyssey plunged helplessly into the abyss. Inside the cosmic entity, an eerie pulsing light filled the corridors, casting long, distorted shadows. The air was thick and oppressive, like being submerged in viscous liquid. Terry and Laros donned their protective suits with shaking hands, sealing themselves off from the alien atmosphere. With halting steps, they ventured out to explore the Void Reaper's twisted innards. The walls seemed to throb with a sickly organic rhythm, and strange tendrils of energy snaked across the surfaces. Deeper and deeper they went, following the anomalous energy signature like a beacon. Then they saw them. Pulsating structures grotesquely alive, embedded in the Void Reaper's flesh. They looked almost like organs, pumping with an unnatural vitality. Laros scanned them with a trembling hand, and his face drained of color. These aren't just power sources, he whispered, voice tinged with horror. They're alive, sentient. They're the ones controlling this thing. A deafening roar shook the chamber, and a monstrous form emerged from the shadows. It was colossal, a nightmarish fusion of organic and mechanical components, its true shape lost in the strobing light. But its eyes burned with a malevolent intelligence that froze Terry and Laros in their tracks. Then the whispers began, slithering into their minds like icy tendrils. The creature spoke without words, its thoughts invading their own. It was ancient, it told them, a being of pure hunger that had consumed countless worlds. The Void Reaper was merely an extension of its will, a tool to harvest the energy it craved, and it would not stop, could not stop, until the universe was remade in its image. Terry and Laros clutched their heads, trying to block out the insidious whispers, but they only grew louder, more insistent, drowning out all other thoughts. They could feel the creature's hunger, its twisted desires, gnawing at the edges of their sanity. This was no mere monster, they realized with dawning horror. It was something far worse, an abomination that defied the very laws of existence. And they were trapped here with it, in the heart of a cosmic nightmare from which there was no escape. The whispers rose to a crescendo, and Terry and Laros screamed. Terry and Laros writhed in agony, clutching their skulls as the creature's psychic assault tore through their minds like a tempest. The insidious whispers wormed their way into every corner of their consciousness, threatening to unravel their very sense of self. Images of countless worlds consumed, civilizations erased from existence, flashed before their eyes in a relentless onslaught. But Terry refused to succumb. Gritting his teeth, he focused on the memories that had always given him strength, his childhood on Earth, the love of his family, the unbreakable spirit that had propelled humanity to the stars. He clung to these thoughts like a lifeline, using them to erect a fragile barrier against the creature's influence. Beside him, Laros gasped as the psychic pressure suddenly eased. How are you doing that?" the Ulian asked, his voice trembling. Seizing the momentary reprieve, they stumbled through the pulsating corridors of the Void Reaper's innards, the walls seeming to throb with malevolent intent. Every step was a battle, their minds constantly assailed by the creature's incessant whispers. As they rounded a corner, they found themselves in a vast chamber that pulsed with an eerie, otherworldly light. Strange crystals protruded from every surface, their facets glinting with a sickly radiance. The air itself seemed to hum with barely restrained power. "These crystals," Laros breathed, his eyes wide with a mix of fear and fascination. "They resonate with the same energy as the creature. If we could harness that power—" Terry nodded grimly. "It might be our only chance." They raced back through the labyrinthine passages, the Void Reaper shuddering around them as if sensing their intent. By the time they reached the Odyssey, they were both trembling with exhaustion, their minds frayed and raw. But there was no time to rest. As soon as they sealed themselves in the ship's lab, they began analyzing the crystal sample, searching for any weakness they could exploit. The Odyssey's systems strained under the assault of incomprehensible data, the readings spiking wildly. Suddenly the ship lurched violently, as a massive psychic shockwave slammed into its hull. Terry and Laros were thrown to the floor as consoles exploded around them, showering them with sparks. The lights flickered once, twice, then died altogether, plunging them into Stygian darkness. In the suffocating blackness, the only illumination came from the eerie glow of the crystal sample, casting distorted shadows across their faces. The creature's whispers rose to a deafening crescendo, a cacophony of hunger and rage that threatened to shatter their sanity. Terry and Laros huddled over the pulsating crystal, their faces gaunt and haunted in its sickly light. They could feel the creature's presence pressing in on them from all sides, a malevolent intelligence that sought to consume everything they were and ever would be. With shaking hands, they delved deeper into the crystal's secrets, racing against time as the Void Reaper's whispers grew ever more insistent. They knew that if they failed, if they succumbed to the creature's will, it would mean the end of everything, not just for them, but for the entire universe. In the darkness, with only the eerie glow of the crystal to guide them, Terry and Laros fought to hold on to their sanity, to find a way to turn this cosmic horror's power against itself. The fate of existence itself hung in the balance, and they were the only ones who could tip the scales. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, until they filled every corner of their minds. Terry and Laros gritted their teeth, their eyes locked on the pulsating crystal as they delved ever deeper into its eldritch secrets. They could feel the creature's rage, its hunger, its all-consuming need to devour and destroy. But they would not yield. They were human and Ulian, and they would fight until their last breath to protect the universe from this nightmare made manifest. Even if it cost them everything, even if it shattered their minds beyond repair, they would find a way to stop the Void Reaper. In the suffocating darkness, with only the crystal's eerie glow to light their way, Terry and Laros stood against the encroaching shadow, their sanity teetering on the brink as they raced to unravel the secrets that could save everything they held dear. In the suffocating darkness of the Odyssey's lab, Terry and Laros hunched over the pulsating crystal sample, their faces gaunt and haunted in its eerie glow. The ship groaned and shuddered around them, straining against the Void Reaper's inexorable pull as the creature's psychic whispers clawed at the edges of their minds. With trembling hands, Terry adjusted the scanners, focusing the beams on the crystal's intricate lattice structure. Laros leaned in, his eyes widening as the readouts flickered across the screen. "There," he breathed, pointing to a complex pattern of energy frequencies. "That resonance, it's unlike anything I've ever seen." Terry nodded grimly, his jaw clenched tight. "If we can find a way to amplify that frequency, broadcast it on a massive scale, we might have a chance to disrupt the Void Reaper's power source," Laros finished, a glimmer of hope sparking in his eyes. But even as they spoke, the enormity of the task settled over them like a leaden weight. The Odyssey's systems were barely holding together, its power reserves dwindling with each passing moment. To amplify the crystal's frequency would require a staggering amount of energy, more than their ship could ever hope to generate. Terry slumped back in his chair, despair etching deep lines into his face. The creature's whispers grew louder, more insistent, pressing against his fragile mental barriers. He squeezed his eyes shut, trying to block out the invasive thoughts, when suddenly a memory surfaced from the depths of his mind. Laros looked at him sharply, confusion and fear mingling in his expression. "What?" "It's an old legend," Terry explained, his words tumbling out in a rush. "A lost Ulian weapon said to be capable of amplifying energy on a cosmic scale." Laros stared at him for a long moment, his face a mask of conflicting emotions. Then slowly he nodded. "I know of it," he said softly. "The siren's call was a weapon of last resort, hidden away by my ancestors millennia ago. They feared its power, the destruction it could unleash. But it could save us," Terry pressed, leaning forward intensely. "Save everyone." Laros hesitated, the weight of his people's history heavy on his shoulders. Then, with a shuddering breath, he met Terry's gaze. "I believe I know where it is. On a desolate planet, on the very edge of Ullian space." Without another word, they scrambled to the Odyssey's controls, plotting a desperate course through the void. The ship bucked and shuddered as they tore free from the Void Reaper's grasp, the creature's psychic screams rising to a deafening crescendo in their minds. Terry gritted his teeth, pouring every ounce of his will into maintaining their tenuous escape. Beside him, Laros clutched the crystal sample to his chest, his eyes distant and haunted. As the Odyssey hurtled through the darkness, the two unlikely allies clung to each other, their minds and hearts united in one final, desperate hope. The siren's call was their last chance, a slender thread of possibility in the face of an all-consuming nightmare. And so they raced on into the unknown, chasing a legend that could be their salvation or their ultimate doom. The Odyssey lurched and shuddered as it tore through the void, its hull groaning under the strain of the desperate flight. In the cockpit, Terry gripped the controls with white knuckles, his eyes fixed on the viewscreen as the desolate planet grew larger before them. Beside him, Laros hunched over the navigation console, his face drawn and haggard. "We're coming in too fast," he warned, his voice tight with tension. "The ship's taken too much damage." Terry gritted his teeth, fighting to keep the Odyssey steady as they plummeted through the atmosphere. The ship bucked and jolted, alarms blaring as they hurtled towards the barren surface below. With a bone-jarring impact, the Odyssey slammed into the rocky ground, skidding and bouncing across the uneven terrain. Terry and Laros were thrown against their restraints, the breath knocked from their lungs as the ship finally shuddered to a halt. For a long moment, they sat in stunned silence, the only sound the hiss of escaping air and the crackle of damaged systems. Then, slowly, they unbuckled their harnesses and staggered to their feet, their bodies aching from the brutal landing. As they stepped out of the airlock, a chill wind whipped across the desolate landscape, stirring up eddies of dust and grit. The planet's surface was a bleak expanse of jagged rocks and deep crevasses, bathed in the eerie, sickly glow of the twin moons overhead. They set out across the rugged terrain, their boots crunching on the loose gravel. As they walked, an unsettling silence pressed in around them, broken only by the mournful howl of the wind. The air was thick and heavy, as if laden with some unseen menace. The further they trekked, the more the unease grew. Shadows seemed to flicker and dance at the edges of their vision, and strange whispers echoed from the depths of the winding canyons. Terry felt the hairs on the back of his neck prickle, a constant sensation of being watched by hidden eyes. But they pressed on, driven by the desperate need to find the siren's call, to put an end to the Void Reaper's terrible hunger. Their path wound through narrow gorges and over treacherous ridges, the terrain growing more difficult with each passing hour. Finally, as they crested a towering cliff, they saw it, the ancient Ullian temple carved into the very rock of the mountain. Its facade was adorned with intricate, alien symbols, glowing with an otherworldly light. As they approached the entrance, a sense of foreboding washed over them, a palpable weight that seemed to press down on their very souls. Terry and Laros exchanged a glance, a silent acknowledgement of the trials that lay ahead. With a deep breath, they stepped into the temple, the air humming with an unseen energy. The walls were etched with glowing glyphs, forming a cryptic map that wound deeper into the mountain's heart. As they navigated the labyrinthine passages, the challenges began, hidden pitfalls that opened beneath their feet, stone guardians that came to life with a grinding of ancient gears, and mind-bending puzzles that seemed to defy all logic. Each trap and trial was more perilous than the last, testing their agility, their intellect, and their sheer force of will. But they pressed on, driven by the knowledge that the fate of the universe rested on their shoulders. At last they emerged into a vast circular chamber, its walls pulsing with an ethereal light. At the center of the room stood a towering crystalline structure, its facets shimmering with an inner fire, the Siren's Call. As they approached the ancient weapon, the air suddenly crackled with energy, and a booming voice filled the chamber. "Who dares to seek the power of the Siren's Call?" it demanded, the words echoing from the very stones. An ancient Ulian guardian materialized before them, its form shimmering with an otherworldly light. It fixed its gaze upon Terry and Laros, its eyes seeming to pierce the very depths of their souls. "I sense the urgency of your quest," the guardian intoned, its voice resonating with ancient power. "But the Siren's Call is not a tool to be wielded lightly. Only those who prove themselves worthy may claim its might." The chamber began to shift and change, the very fabric of reality warping around them. Terry and Laros braced themselves, knowing that the true test of their mettle was about to begin. The Guardian's voice rang out once more, echoing through the swirling vortex of energy. "Let the final trial commence," it declared, as the chamber dissolved into a maelstrom of light and shadow. "Prove yourselves, champions of the universe, and the Siren's Call shall be yours." Terry and Laros exchanged a final, determined look, their eyes blazing with the fire of their shared resolve. Together, they plunged into the heart of the tempest, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, to sacrifice everything for the chance to save the galaxy from the Void Reaper's relentless hunger. Terry and Laros exchanged a determined look as they faced the towering guardian, its form shimmering with an otherworldly energy. The ancient being's voice boomed through the chamber, echoing off the stone walls. "To claim the Siren's Call, you must prove your worth," the guardian intoned, its eyes glowing with an intense, piercing light. "Face the trials that lie ahead, and test the limits of your strength, your cunning, and your resolve." With a wave of its hand, the guardian summoned a shimmering portal, its surface rippling like liquid silver. Beyond the portal, Terry and Laros could see a twisting maze of shifting walls and treacherous paths, each turn hiding unknown dangers. "Your first trial awaits," the guardian declared, gesturing towards the portal. "Navigate the labyrinth and trust in your wits and agility to guide you through." Terry and Laros stepped through the portal, the air around them shimmering and warping as they crossed the threshold. Instantly, they found themselves standing at the entrance of the maze, its walls looming high above them, casting long shadows across the ground. As they made their way into the labyrinth, the walls began to shift and change, rearranging themselves in a dizzying array of patterns. Terry and Laros pressed on, their senses on high alert as they navigated the treacherous paths. Suddenly, a hidden trap sprang to life, a hail of razor-sharp darts whistling through the air towards them. Terry and Laros dove to the side, narrowly avoiding the deadly barrage. They rolled to their feet, hearts pounding, and continued on, their steps more cautious now, their eyes scanning the walls for any sign of further danger. As they delved deeper into the maze, the traps grew more frequent and more deadly, pressure plates that triggered jets of searing flame, pitfalls that opened beneath their feet, and crushing walls that threatened to smash them flat. But Terry and Laros persevered, their reflexes honed by years of training and their minds sharpened by the constant threat of death. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of twists and turns and near misses, they emerged from the maze, their bodies slick with sweat and their chests heaving with exertion. The Guardian's voice echoed through the chamber once more, a hint of approval in its tone. "Well done," it said, "but your trials are far from over." Another portal shimmered into existence, and Terry and Laros stepped through without hesitation, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. On the other side, they found themselves in a vast, circular room, its walls lined with ancient Ulian machinery, gears and pistons and whirring blades all moving in a complex interlocking dance. "Your strength and endurance will be tested here," the Guardian intoned. "Face the gauntlet and prove your physical prowess." Terry and Laros exchanged a brief, determined nod, then threw themselves into the fray. They leaped and dodged, ducked and rolled, their bodies straining against the weight of the machinery as they fought to keep ahead of the whirling blades and slamming pistons. The room seemed to stretch on forever, each new challenge more grueling than the last. Terry felt his muscles burning, his lungs screaming for air, but he pushed on, drawing on reserves of strength he never knew he possessed. Beside him, Laros struggled on, his face etched with grim determination. As they battled their way through the gauntlet, the Guardian's voice taunted them, whispering cryptic riddles and dire warnings of the consequences of failure. But Terry and Laros ignored the taunts. Their focus narrowed to the task at hand, their minds locked on the goal that lay ahead. Finally, battered and bruised, they staggered out of the machinery, their chests heaving and their bodies trembling with exhaustion. The Guardian's voice rang out once more, a note of grudging respect in its tone. "You have proven your physical mettle," it said, "but one final trial remains." A shimmering portal appeared before them, its surface swirling with an eerie, hypnotic light. Terry and Laros exchanged a long, meaningful look, then stepped through together, ready to face whatever horrors lay on the other side. They found themselves standing in a surreal, nightmarish landscape, the very air around them thick with a palpable sense of dread. The ground beneath their feet was a roiling sea of shadows, and the sky above was a swirling vortex of darkness. As they pressed on, the landscape began to shift and change, taking on the form of their deepest fears and darkest secrets. Terry found himself face to face with the spectre of his own mortality, a grinning skeleton that reached out to him with bony fingers. Laros, meanwhile, was confronted by the ghosts of his people's past failures, accusing eyes that bored into his very soul. And through it all, the insidious influence of the Void Reaper seeped into their minds, whispering dark thoughts and seeding doubt and despair. Terry and Laros fought back against the psychic onslaught, their wills straining against the crushing weight of the creature's malevolence. Step by step, they pushed on through the nightmarish realm, battling not only the manifestations of their own inner demons, but also the cloying, oppressive darkness that threatened to swallow them whole. They clung to each other, drawing strength from their shared resolve, their shared commitment to the cause that had brought them here. And finally, after what felt like an eternity of torment and struggle, they emerged from the final trial, their minds battered but unbroken, their spirits bruised but undefeated. The Guardian's voice rang out once more, a note of solemn respect in its tone. "You have proven yourselves worthy," it said. "The Siren's call is yours." Terry and Laros stepped forward, their hands trembling as they reached out to take hold of the ancient weapon. They could feel its power thrumming through the air, a palpable force that seemed to resonate with the very fabric of the universe itself. As their fingers closed around the Siren's call, a surge of energy coursed through their bodies, a rush of raw, primal power that left them gasping. They could feel the weapon's might flowing through them, a staggering force that dwarfed anything they had ever known. And in that moment, they knew that they were ready. Ready to face the Void Reaper, ready to bring an end to its reign of terror, ready to wield the awesome might of the Siren's call in defense of all that they held dear. The fate of the galaxy hung in the balance, and Terry and Laros stood at the very center of the storm, the only hope for a universe on the brink of annihilation. As Terry and Laros emerged from the ancient Ullian temple, the Siren's call clutched tightly in their hands. They allowed themselves a fleeting moment of triumph. The weapon's power thrummed through their veins, a palpable force that seemed to resonate with the very fabric of the universe. But their elation was short-lived. As they made their way towards the Odyssey, the air around them suddenly grew cold, and an eerie stillness settled over the temple grounds. Terry's hand instinctively tightened around the grip of the Siren's call, his senses on high alert. From the shadows of the temple, a group of spectral figures materialized, their translucent forms flickering in the dim light. The ghostly warriors, clad in ancient Ullian armor, moved with an otherworldly grace, their eyes fixed upon the Siren's call. "You who seek to wield the Siren's call," one of the spectres intoned, his voice echoing through the stillness, "prove your worth, or be forever damned. Terry and Laros exchanged a tense glance, realizing that they had no choice but to engage in the ritual combat demanded by the ghostly guardians. They took up defensive stances, the siren's call at the ready, as the spectral warriors circled them like predators stalking their prey. The battle began in a flurry of movement, the ghostly warriors lunging forward with supernatural speed. Terry and Laros met them head-on, their physical prowess matched against the otherworldly might of their foes. The siren's call pulsed in Terry's grip, its energy seeming to flow through him, guiding his movements. He ducked and weaved, the weapon's blades slicing through the air as he parried the spectre's ethereal strikes. Beside him, Laros fought with a fierce determination, his Ulian training coming to the fore as he engaged the ghostly warriors in a deadly dance. The air crackled with energy as the combatants clashed, the temple walls pulsing and shifting in response to the ebb and flow of the battle. As the fight wore on, Terry and Laros felt their strength beginning to wane, their bodies pushed to the brink of exhaustion. The ghostly warriors, seemingly tireless, pressed their advantage, driving the pair back towards the temple's entrance. In a moment of desperation, Terry reached out with his mind, channeling the latent energy of the siren's call. He felt the weapon's power surging through him, a searing heat that threatened to consume him from within. With a cry of defiance, Terry unleashed a powerful psychic blast, the energy rippling outward in a shockwave that slammed into the ghostly warriors. The spectres staggered back, their forms flickering and fading as the siren's call disrupted their connection to the temple. The ghostly warriors let out a collective howl of anguish, their voices echoing through the ancient halls as their forms began to dissipate. Terry and Laros watched in stunned silence as the spectres faded away, leaving them alone in the now silent temple. Battered and bruised but victorious, they made their way back to the Odyssey, the siren's call securely in their possession. As they prepared to depart the planet and set a course for the heart of the Void Reaper, a sudden hail crackled over the ship's comm system. "This is Captain Elara of the Ulian vessel Starfire," a desperate voice called out. "We are under attack by the Void Reaper. I repeat, we are under attack. We need immediate assistance." Terry and Laros exchanged a look of grim determination, the weight of their mission hanging heavy upon their shoulders. They knew that every moment counted, that the fate of the entire universe rested upon their actions. But as the distress call echoed through the Odyssey's cockpit, they found themselves faced with an impossible choice. To answer the call for help would mean risking precious time that could mean the difference between victory and defeat. Yet to ignore the plea, to press on towards their ultimate goal while innocent lives hung in the balance. Terry's hand hovered over the comm controls, his mind racing as he weighed the consequences of his decision. In that moment, the fate of the universe itself seemed to balance on a knife's edge, and the choice he made would echo through the ages to come. Terry's hand hovered over the comm controls, his mind racing as he weighed the consequences of his decision. The distress call echoed through the cockpit, a desperate plea for help from a besieged system. Yet the Void Reaper loomed in the distance, an ever-present threat that demanded their immediate attention. Laros looked to Terry, his eyes filled with a mix of concern and determination. "We can't ignore this," he said softly. "Every life we save is a victory against the Void Reaper's destruction." Terry nodded, his jaw clenched tight. He knew Laros was right. They had a duty to help those in need, even if it meant risking precious time in their mission to stop the cosmic horror that threatened the entire universe. With a deep breath, Terry opened the comm channel. "Captain Elara, this is Terry Baker of the Odyssey. We're on our way." As they approached the besieged system, the true scale of the devastation became apparent. Planets crumbled under the Void Reaper's onslaught, their surfaces scarred and broken. The remnants of once proud civilizations drifted in the void, reduced to ash and debris. Amidst the chaos, the Odyssey's sensors detected a faint energy signature, similar to that of the siren's call, emanating from the surface of a nearby planet. Intrigued, Terry and Laros descended through the planet's atmosphere, the ship shuddering as it passed through clouds of swirling dust and debris. As they drew closer to the surface, the ruins of an ancient alien city came into view. Towering spires and sprawling boulevards lay in rubble, the once magnificent structures now little more than shattered remnants of a lost civilization. Terry set the Odyssey down on the outskirts of the ruins, the ship's landing gear sinking into the ashen soil. He and Laros donned their protective gear, the siren's call securely fastened to Terry's back, and set out to explore the desolate cityscape. The air was thick with the acrid scent of decay, and an eerie silence hung over the ruins like a shroud. Terry and Laros picked their way through the rubble, their footsteps echoing off the crumbling walls. Suddenly, a flurry of movement caught their attention. From the shadows of a collapsed building, a group of figures emerged, a ragtag band of aliens from various species, their faces haggard and their eyes haunted. Terry and Laros tensed, their hands instinctively reaching for their weapons, but the aliens made no move to attack, instead approaching cautiously, their hands raised in a gesture of peace. "You carry the siren's call," one of them said, his voice rasping with exhaustion. "We have been seeking that weapon, hoping to use its power against the Void Reaper." Terry and Laros exchanged a glance, surprised by the survivors' knowledge of the legendary weapon. As they shared their own story and their plan to confront the Void Reaper directly, the survivors listened intently, hope flickering in their eyes for the first time in ages. "The energy signature you detected," another survivor spoke up. "It's not another siren's call, it's a component of the weapon itself, a key that could unlock its full potential." The survivors went on to explain that the component had been hidden on this planet long ago by the Ullians, as a safeguard against the weapon falling into the wrong hands. With renewed determination, Terry, Laros, and their newfound allies set out to recover the component, ready to brave whatever challenges lay ahead. As they delved deeper into the ruins, the group encountered terrifying creatures, twisted by the Void Reaper's influence. Monstrous beings that seemed to meld flesh and shadow, their forms shifting and writhing in the dim light. The vengeful spirits of those who had fallen in defense of the city also haunted the ruins, their spectral forms lashing out at the intruders. But Terry and Laros pressed on, the power of the siren's call and the skills of their allies, allowing them to overcome each obstacle. They fought their way through crumbling corridors and across debris-strewn plazas, the eerie energy signature growing stronger with each step. At last, they reached the chamber where the component was hidden, a vast circular room filled with the twisted remains of ancient machinery. And there, at the center of the chamber, stood a final, horrifying guardian, a being of pure darkness, its form writhing with the malevolent essence of the Void Reaper itself. The battle that followed pushed Terry and Laros to their very limits, testing their strength, their willpower, and their sanity. The creature's shadows lashed out at them, searing their flesh and clouding their minds with visions of despair. But they would not yield. With the power of the siren's call and the unwavering support of their allies, Terry and Laros fought on, their weapons blazing with the energy of the cosmic artifact, and in a final, desperate surge, they struck down the Guardian, its form dissolving into a cloud of swirling shadow. Breathing heavily, Terry reached out and claimed the component, feeling its power thrumming through his fingers. With a nod to Laros and their allies, he attached the piece to the siren's call, watching as the weapon pulsed with a new, even greater intensity. They had done it. The siren's call was complete, its power now fully unleashed, and with it they would face the Void Reaper, ready to end its reign of terror once and for all. As they made their way back to the Odyssey, Terry and Laros rallied their allies, their voices ringing out across the ruins with a newfound strength and determination. They had seen the devastation wrought by the Void Reaper, the countless lives consumed by its hunger. But now, with the siren's call at their side and a united force standing with them, they knew that they had a chance to save not just a single system, but the entire universe from the Void Reaper's grasp. The Odyssey rose from the ashen soil, its engines roaring to life as it turned towards the stars. And there, on the ship's view screen, the Void Reaper loomed, a swirling mass of darkness that seemed to devour the very light around it. Terry's grip tightened on the ship's controls, his eyes narrowing as he stared out at the cosmic horror that had haunted their every step. Beside him, Laros and their allies stood ready, their faces set with grim determination. They had come so far, had sacrificed so much, and now with the full power of the Siren's call at their command, they would face the Void Reaper head-on, ready to unleash the fury of the cosmos against the darkness that threatened to consume all. The Odyssey surged forward, the Siren's call pulsing with an otherworldly energy as it closed in on the Void Reaper. And as the battle began, the fate of the universe hanging in the balance, Terry and Laros knew that they would fight to the end, no matter the cost. For they were the last hope, the only chance for the galaxy to survive, and they would not fail, not now, not ever. They would stand against the darkness, and they would win. As the Odyssey surged forward, Terry and Laros exchanged a look of grim determination, the full weight of their mission bearing down upon them. The Siren's call pulsed with an otherworldly energy, its power thrumming through the ship's hull as they closed in on the heart of the Void Reaper. The viewscreen filled with a swirling maelstrom of darkness, a cosmic horror that seemed to consume the very fabric of reality itself. Terry's grip tightened on the controls, his jaw clenched as he guided the ship into the abyss. As they crossed the threshold into the Void Reaper's domain, the darkness engulfed them, an oppressive weight that pressed in from all sides. The ship's sensors went haywire, overwhelmed by the sheer magnitude of the entity's presence. Suddenly, a horde of nightmarish creatures materialized before them, twisted abominations born of the Void Reaper's malevolent will. Their forms were a grotesque fusion of organic and mechanical components, their eyes burning with a soulless hunger. The Odyssey plunged into the fray, its weapons blazing as Terry and Laros led the charge. The Siren's call sang its deadly song, its energy tearing through the Void Reaper's minions like a scythe through wheat. But even as they carved a path of destruction, the toll of the battle began to mount. Allies fell one by one, their screams lost in the cacophony of the fight. The Void Reaper's forces were relentless, a tide of horror that threatened to overwhelm them at every turn. Terry and Laros fought on, their faces grim and sweat-streaked, the Siren's call pulsing in their hands. They pressed forward, driven by the knowledge that the fate of the universe rested on their shoulders. As they neared the core of the entity, the darkness seemed to thicken, the air itself heavy with despair. And then they saw it. Not a single being, but a seething mass of tortured souls, a collective consciousness bound together in an endless cycle of torment. The true face of the Void Reaper was a twisted amalgamation of all it had consumed, a patchwork of agonized faces and writhing limbs. Terry and Laros recoiled in horror, their minds reeling from the sheer wrongness of the sight. But even as they struggled to comprehend the enormity of the entity's evil, a grim realization dawned. To defeat the Void Reaper, they would have to sever its connection to the souls it had enslaved, to free them from its grasp. Terry's eyes met Laros's, a silent understanding passing between them. They knew what had to be done, the sacrifice that would be required. With a final desperate cry, Terry raised the Siren's call, the weapon's energy pulsing in his hands. He charged forward, plunging into the heart of the Void Reaper, the weapon's power tearing through the bonds that held the trapped souls in thrall. Laros watched in horror as his friend disappeared into the maelstrom, the Siren's call's energy consuming him in a blinding flash of light. The Void Reaper convulsed, its form unraveling as the souls it had imprisoned were finally released. And then silence. The darkness receded, the Void Reaper collapsing in on itself like a dying star. Laros stood alone on the bridge of the Odyssey, his eyes fixed on the spot where Terry had vanished, the bitter taste of victory ashes in his mouth. He felt the weight of the lives they had lost, the sacrifice that had been made to save the universe from an unspeakable evil. But even as he mourned, Laros knew that Terry's sacrifice would not be forgotten. that the story of the human who had given everything to save a universe that had once scorned him would endure, a testament to the indomitable spirit of humanity. He turned to the surviving allies, their faces haggard and haunted in the aftermath of the battle. There was still work to be done, a galaxy to rebuild from the ashes of the Void Reaper's destruction. But for now, they would honor the memory of those who had fallen and carry their legacy forward into the stars. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.